Welcome to Chucked and Blessed, where the weird gets wonderful and the woo-woo gets real. I'm your host, Charles Crooks, psychic, teacher, and guide on this deep dive into grounded spirituality. Let's keep it honest, curious, and connected. Here we go. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Chucked and Blessed. And for this one, we are going to finally talk more about the tarot. I initially thought I was going to do this episode earlier on, but it just didn't happen, and so I thought it wanted to wait till the end. So here we are. There's still one more episode after this to wrap up everything, but starting with the tarot, this is something that I have done since 2004. I had just come back from Japan. I was back at school, and I mentioned this in another episode, but I was watching Charmed, and I believe it was Paige was doing a reading for one of her sisters, and for some reason that was just kind of the last little straw to be like, you know what, I want to do that too. So I drove myself north. This was when I was going to school out in Bowling Green, Ohio, which is in the middle of nowhere. And so I had to drive up towards Toledo, which was about half an hour north, just to even get to a store to find such a thing. And so I got myself a starter deck, just the standard Rider-Waite-Smith deck. That's probably the most famously recognized of all the decks out there. And I got myself the Idiot's Guide to Tarot and just kind of began there. And so never did I ever think that I would be doing it this many years later, or that I would be reading professionally, but here we are, and it's something that I have a very deep love and respect for. So of course that doesn't mean my relationship with it has always been lovey-dovey throughout the years. Sometimes you can find that it can be very frustrating, as my journey definitely was. So as always, let's start with just some basic history of it, as it goes a little bit longer back than I initially thought it did. So here we go. Tarot decks originated in Italy in the 1430s as a variation of standard playing cards. They added a fifth suit to the 21 illustrated trump cards, plus an extra wild card known as the Fool. These decks use Italian suits, swords, cups, batons, coins, comprising 56 normal cards plus the trumps. The Visconti Forza decks, hand-painted for the noble Visconti and Forza families of Milan, are the earliest surviving examples and show elaborate allegorical imagery, reflecting the power and culture of the time. And scholar Michael Dumont later confirmed the tarot's earliest purpose was as a trick-taking card game, and that there's no evidence of occult or divinatory use before the late 18th century. So over the 15th and 16th centuries, tarot was used primarily as a game across northern Italy, perhaps later spreading to France and beyond. Surviving decks like Sola Busca, late 15th century, are the earliest complete 78 card decks, which is the deck that we see today, with fully illustrated pips and unique trump artwork. The chronology of tarot shows that the game continued evolving for centuries before any mystical reinterpretation ever occurred. It wasn't until the late 18th century France that tarot became associated with the occult. In 1781, Antoine Court de Gébelin, a French pastor and scholar, claimed that tarot cards were remnants of an ancient Egyptian wisdom text, the Book of Thoth. However, this was without historical evidence. And shortly after, Jean-Baptiste Alliot, under the pen name Atelia, published Methods for Tarot Divination from around 1783, authored an influential book on reading tarot, and even produced his own fortune-telling deck. In the 19th century, tarot's esoteric reputation grew through occultists like Eliphas Levi, though many of his claims were later shown to be fictitious. In 1890, poet W.B. Yeats joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, where tarot was central to their rituals. It was a blend of magic, Kabbalah, and symbolism. And then members of the Golden Dawn later influenced modern decks. The Rider-Waite-Smith deck, created by Arthur E. Waite and illustrated by Pamela Colman Smith, was published in 1909 and remains the most widely recognized deck today. That was the same one that I mentioned earlier, the same one that I got from my very first deck. And another significant deck, the Thoth Tarot, was developed by Aleister Crowley and artist Frieda Harris in the 1930s, further embedding occult imagery and symbolism. And so tarot's historical journey has now been exhibited in institutions like the London Warburg Institute. In 2025, there was an exhibition of tarot origins and afterlives, highlighting its transformation from mid-15th century court game to global cultural phenomenon. And today, tarot is no longer solely an occult tool. Designers incorporate it into art, literature, fashion, and personal self-reflection. Its enduring allure lies in its rich symbolism and participatory nature. And there we have it. What started as a card game has changed into what we know it to be now. And instead of calling it a divination tool, I like to think of it as a reflection tool. But of course, I did not always see it this way. And as I've mentioned in other episodes as well, especially the reading episode, when I first started tarot, I got into it because I wanted to be told what to do by a divine source. And initially, I did not care whether that divine source was spirit guides, higher self, whatever. I just wanted it to be something outside of myself. And it made me feel like I had the secret answers from a higher power, and I was chosen to then interpret those answers for others. But the more I read, the more I noticed that it often reflected how I felt. I never wanted to accept that the meaning in the cards was actually coming directly from myself. It seemed less magical that way because I didn't see myself as magical in any way, shape, or form. But the more I accepted that it did come from myself, it actually deepened my practice as a reader and my relationship with the tarot as a whole. It allowed me to take responsibility for where I was and the choices I had ahead of myself. It also made making those choices a lot less scary because it took away from the divine right and wrong path. I think when I saw tarot as a divine instrument, I was always afraid of making the wrong choice. And what if my spirit guides or whoever was guiding me was disappointed in me for choosing the wrong path? This fear would then put me in a path of choosing no path at all because I was more scared of the greater potential of doing wrong. And I think this is one of the reasons where we have to be careful in using tarot as a divination tool. Also, if we as readers are saying that there's going to be an outcome, I find the readee often has a greater chance of manifesting that outcome because they are then looking for it to happen. Now, that's great if the outcome is good or if the outcome given is good, but it can lead to a lot of unnecessary fear in a person if the outcome is more towards the negative side. Things can also lead to greater disappointment for a readee if, of course, an outcome is promised and it does not show itself. I think if you are a reader, it doesn't matter if you're a professional or just starting out as an amateur. I think you have a responsibility to decide if you will future read or not. And if you do so, I think it's important to see what kind of ethics you have in telling the future possibilities to a readee, and even understand what responsibility you carry within that. So, as the years went by, I continued to study and practice the tarot. But one of my biggest challenges as a new reader came when I tried to interpret multiple cards together in the same reading. Sometimes they often seemed contradictory to what they seemed to be telling my readee. I always felt embarrassed not being able to get to the deeper meanings of the cards, especially when I saw other readers doing so. And so I was learning the cards more as individuals and didn't see the ways that they talked and interacted with each other. So when I moved to Bellingham in 2009, I joined a tarot group that met up once a month and met several people who have been highly influential to my tarot practice to this day. The greatest thing about the group was that it taught me to hear the language of the cards instead of just the individual surface meanings. It taught me the wealth of knowledge and depth that can be gained within just a single card. It taught me how to let the cards speak to each other and let their energies converse with one another. It also taught me how to find my intuitive rhythm and voice as I read. And for that, I am forever grateful for all of those meetups. And honestly, still greatly miss it to this day, as it wrapped up many years ago. As I continued to learn the cards, I learned that when they worked together, they revealed their connected stories, which made learning the individual cards so much easier. I was then not only able to see the surface level meaning, but I started to learn the bigger patterns, which took away a lot of pressure from card memorization. It also taught me that there is a flow that can be felt in every reading. It is something I check for before I begin going over the cards with another person, and even do so for myself. If I don't feel that connective flow, I will usually have the person ground a bit and do a reshuffle. And I've also found that in doing a reshuffle, sometimes the exact same cards may pop up again, but they'll do so in a different way to deliver the same message. All right, so now I would like to get into my system of basically understanding the whole tarot deck and kind of breaking it down. So if you are completely unfamiliar with the tarot, this might seem like a lot of gibberish to you, but at the very least, I hope it makes you curious enough to go out and pick up a deck sometime yourself. So, in a tarot deck, the one thing that makes tarot is that we see the same 78 cards in every deck. So the artwork could be different between all the different decks, but we still see the same 78 cards. And so within a deck, you have the major cards and you have the minor cards. So in the history, when it mentioned those trump cards, those are all of the major cards. And so within the minor cards, we then have 4 suits within that. So we're going to start with just a very, very, very broad overview of pretty much the whole deck, starting with the major cards. And so as I kind of look at those, they start with card 0 and run through card 21. So there's 22 cards total, even though the numbers only go through 21. And I kind of see them, or at least I found greater understanding through them when I broke them down into kind of 3 different story arcs. And so I see the first story arc is really the learning arc of the Fool. So as I kind of described this is all about the Fool's journey as they kind of move through the tarot and learn all of these lessons. So that's who I'm going to refer to moving through kind of this whole greater arc of the major arcana. So starting with the Fool, card 0. We have the Fool starting out on a new adventure, on new journeys, and this first arc is really about how he experiences all of the major archetypes of life and within people. So after the Fool, he goes on and meets the Magician. The Magician really tells the Fool that he has all the tools already necessary to make magic happen in his life. So then, in understanding magic, the Fool then meets the High Priestess. And the High Priestess is all about understanding our psychic, intuitive side. It's a side that contains all of our emotions and our deeper parts of ourself that can connect to our intuitive voice and everything that relates to that, I would say, kind of more spiritual side within us. So then, after the High Priestess, he meets the Empress and the Emperor. So basically, the two highest male and female figures of the deck. And when I use terms like male and female, I'm not necessarily speaking specifically to gender itself, but more so to what it represents on an energetic level. And so I'm going to get a little bit more into that with the elements when I get into the minor arcana. But the Empress is strongest female in the deck, and she represents creation, our creativity, while the Emperor represents lessons of control in how we go about things. And so from there, he meets the Hierophant, also known sometimes as the priest or the Pope. And so that is really then an understanding of lessons of society and the greater whole in conformity, and whether we're going to kind of go against that grain or with it. And then from there, he meets the Lovers, and that's really all about understanding lessons of partnership. So the Fool in partnership with something else doesn't necessarily have to be romantic love, but just understanding that there are all sorts of different relationships that we can have connection to. And so after that, we encounter the last card of this arc, and that is the Chariot. And so after all these initial lessons, the Fool then says, okay, I have enough information and experience to be able to start driving my life in the direction that I want and take off from there. And so that concludes what I see to be the first arc, and that's really just the learning arc. So then next up, we go into what I see as the most challenging arc, and that is what I call the adulting arc, because we see lessons of adulting over and over again. And a lot of times when I read for people, these are the cards that I see come up probably the most as people's major energy and themes, but I think is totally natural because they're lessons that we go through over and over again, whether we're kids, teenagers, or adults. There's something that are very prevalent within our lives. So the adulting cards start with the card of Strength. Strength teaches us not only to have strength within our lives, but also to have courage for it and to take risks and chances for our life. So then we move on to the Hermit, and the Hermit's all about not, of course, sequestering yourself away from the world, but the Hermit is all about understanding that you have all the answers within yourself, and we can go deeper within ourselves, but then we have to bring that information back out again. So it's not just about going into those quiet, deeper parts within us, but it's about coming back out so we can share that information and knowledge. So then we move on to the Wheel of Fortune, and the Wheel of Fortune is really, I see a card about perspective and kind of where you place yourself on that wheel as it turns. You can have a very grounded perspective, or you can kind of have a perspective that life is turning you, and when you're in that space, things feel a little bit more chaotic. So then we go on to Justice. Also, I do want to note that in some decks, you might see Justice and Strength swapped, but the version I'm going off of this is just the standard Rider-Waite-Smith, which I'm sorry I did not mention that before. So sometimes you might see that swapped, but in this case, we're going with card number 11 as Justice, so after the Wheel of Fortune. And I really see Justice as lessons of being true to yourself. How do you balance your own scales of morality and ethics? And really, how do you show the world your truest version of self and who you are. And so then from there, we go into the hangman. And the hangman, kind of like the Wheel of Fortune, is about perspective, but I would say it's about more of uncomfortable perspective. When when the hangman comes up, we often have to throw ourselves into a different space of understanding because doing things the same way is not working for us. So from there, we encounter the lessons of death. And death, I see as a very positive thing. All the things, even if they have negative kind of names or connotations like death, the devil, sorts of cards, I see them as still very, very good. Because death is about change, and it's about understanding that things need to have a complete ending at times in order to have a completely new beginning. So in understanding those cycles of life. And so from there, we go on to temperance. And temperance is really about, I would say, a greater understanding of balance within yourself and within the world around you. And I always say that temperance is connected to patience. And when you are patient, you also have balance. And so from there, we go on to the devil. And the devil is really about understanding habits and repeating patterns that no longer work for us. So if the devil comes up, it's actually a really good chance of opportunity to start moving away from those things that we no longer need to spend our time doing anymore. So then we hit the final card of the adulting lessons, and that is the Tower. And I kind of see the Tower as an advanced version of death because it has very intense catastrophic change, or at least the change can feel catastrophic. But oftentimes there's a lot of adulting and growth that comes with these really hard, difficult changes that help us grow as people because we can see that rubble that the Tower makes and either decide to try and make the exact same structure, repeat the things, and do the exact same habits, same ways of being. But hopefully you had learned from the devil in the previous card to not do those same things, because then when those catastrophic things happen in the Tower, you can say, all right, even though I am uncomfortable working through this, I can finally choose to do things in a different way and grow from it and walk away from all that sameness. So then that takes us to the very third arc, which I see as the spiritual arc, or I guess the kind of higher lessons of spirituality. Alrighty, so kicking off the spiritual arc, we have the Star. So after the chaos of the Tower, I always like to compare the Star to the movie The Neverending Story. At the very end, when the childlike empress holds that one single grain of sand and that's all that's left of Fantasia, that reminds me of the Star and its energy, because you can also think of the Star as like when you wish upon a star, it's all about hope, and it's about looking towards the future, and it's about understanding that there's going to be something brighter, even if you just have that tiniest glimmer of light in the sky. So from the Star, we then move on to the Moon, and the Moon gives us a little bit more light in the sky. But however, when we're traveling on that path, whether it's through the woods or through the darkness, the Moon gives us just enough light to be able to see where we're going, but there's still plenty of shadows. There's still plenty of fear as we navigate that path. But the Moon tells us everything is okay, and we got to trust our intuition to keep on going. So there's very much kind of that element of the High Priestess in trusting your path along with the Moon, because then we get from the Moon to the Sun. And once you see everything lit up in the full sun in the full light of day, you're then of course like, what was I worried about? All of these shadows that were coming from the trees, they're absolutely nothing now that I can see it in the daytime or in the full light. So the sun represents everything connected to our happiness and celebration and feeling good and celebrating new life. You might see signs of pregnancy sometimes related to this card, but it's all about joy, essentially, and being able to find that joy and having the courage to keep on moving through the darkness to that joy. So then we have what I consider to be one of the most confusing cards of the majors, and that is Judgment. I think Judgment by name absolutely sucks because it's a really good card to get. And Judgment is really about kind of those bigger spiritual moments of putting yourself in a space where we can receive that divine inspiration and divine messages in a very easy way. And I think you can only do so after you've had kind of a lot of these harder lessons of life to be able to say, you know what, I accept things as they are. And in doing so, I think we find that divine guidance and those divine messages come to us a little bit easier. So Judgment's really about being open to something greater than yourself and allowing it to come in a way that inspires you. Because then we hit the very last card of the majors, and that is the World. And the World, pretty much like you think end of the story, it's about attainment, it's about finishing. But of course, World being a circle tells you that at the end, there's always a new beginning after it. So once you hit the World, you can then start your next journey over again as the Fool and repeat that process all over again. So basically, these are all archetypes that we see throughout our lives and different lessons that we go through, and have these very big, strong energies, kind of big life moments connected to them. So now let's run off to the minor cards really quick. I'm not going to go card by card because there's a lot, but just kind of give a very general overview about the suits and things like that. So here we go into the minors. So for the minor cards within the tarot, we see that there are 4 suits, and within every suit, there's cards that start with Ace as your 1 that run through 10, and then we have the court cards that go after that, and within every court, there's cards for every suit as well. So every suit has 1 through 10, and then 4 court cards. So starting with the suits themselves, we have the swords, the wands, the cups, and the pentacles. And each suit connects to one of the elements. The wands connects to fire, the swords connects to air, the cups to water, and the pentacles to earth. And so I kind of see that there's 2 active elements and 2 passive elements, kind of like what I was referring to the Empress and Emperor, where we see male and female, again referring more so to energy, not to gender itself specifically. And so the 2 male active elements would be air and fire, and the 2 passive female elements would be your earth and water. And within each story, I kind of see that there's 2 kind of stories of success and happiness, and 2 that are riddled with more challenge. And so I see the challenging ones being our active elements, and those are the suits of wands and swords, where the more passive elements of earth and water connect to the cups and pentacles. And so again, the water I see as more of kind of happy, joyful story, whereas the air and then fire, swords and wands, are more of the challenging stories. And just to give a really quick rundown of what each suit represents, for the swords, that represent issues of the mind and communication, and wands represent our actions and our spirit, how we go into those actions. The cups represent our emotions and everything related to that psychic side of ourselves. And the pentacles represent the physical world around us. So that could be your job, your money, and also the community. So within all of that, the aces are the ones I kind of see as gifts from the universe. And then we go through each of the numbers, and I can even see how numerology can play into this and the meaning of the cards, as the twos can represent something, the threes can represent, but we're going to skip up to the fives because they all represent challenges, and the tens at the end all represent endings. And so within that, we then have those court cards that I mentioned, and then we have 4 pages, 4 knights, 4 queens, and 4 kings. And so I kind of see the pages as representing youthful energy. And of course, the court cards are representing more people or ways that we can be as people. And so within that, I see the pages representing that youthful energy. Knights represent action and how we take that action. And then the queens and kings represent how we go about that action, how we put it into motion, how we also take experience from our past, how we've learned from things, and really kind of, if you think about the position of a king or queen, you can think about how they've gotten there from their life experience, most likely, and how they use that experience, while you then have the 4 elements kind of influencing the personalities and the personality traits that are shown by those people. And so, to give you an example of how all of this gets put together, I'm going to share with you my favorite tarot spread that I like to do more often than not, or at least start my readings with when I like to look into something for a readie. So I'm going to do a little demo reading for you guys. That will be kind of, let's just go with a collective reading right now. And so we'll just kind of say, whenever you stumble upon this, hopefully it has some meaning that you can connect to your life when you hear it. So first off, let's explain how I pull the cards, how I lay them, and where they go. Okay, so when I do a reading with the tarot, if I am laying down multiple cards, I like to have meaning for where I am placing those cards. So, for example, on this reading, this pulls 5 cards total, or at least 5 cards that we are going to read. And when I start, I like to start pulling until I get the first major card that pops up. So for our reading here, I've already pre-shuffled the cards a bit, and I have started pulling from the top after I feel good about my shuffle. And let's see, first card was the Page of Wands, so we're going to just put that down, go on to the next, as it's not a major card. Next up, we have the Six of Coins, not a major, so we're going to pull again. Ooh, next up we have the Devil. So that is a major card. So that is going to be the very first card that I read, as it's our first major. So after that, I am going to pull the next 3 cards that came after that first major. And let's see, we have first up the 7 of Swords. Next up we have the 5 of Wands. And after that, also the 5 of Swords. Interesting. Getting ahead of myself here. But the positions that we're going to read for these, and again, these were just the next 3 cards after that first major. The first card that I pulled is going to be our opportunity. The next card after that is going to be our challenge. And the card after that, the third one, is going to be another opportunity. And so after that, I pull the 4th card after the major, and I like to set that at the bottom because that is going to represent our actions. And I often find that our actions are really the foundation of things to come. So I like to put it on its side, just kind of everything under everything else, as I don't know, it just kind of gives a little stability. So no right or wrong as to how you want to place any of these cards. But also I should note that I don't read reversals anymore. When I first started as a reader, reversals were something that I did often read, but I noticed that they could totally change the feeling of a reading, even just with depending how that readie turned the deck and handed you the cards. So what might have been something very positive then kind of would turn to almost be very negative if I was using the reversal meanings. And so I found that every single card within every deck has positive and negative associations with it, and you can get both of those meanings within a card that's right side up and doesn't necessarily have to be reversal. So for example, the card that's in our challenge spot, let's see, that was the Five of Wands, the second card that we pulled after the major. That one I can kind of read as I would as a reversal because we're looking for the challenging aspects of it. So you can still find that reversal meaning if you would like without having to reverse the card. So one other thing that I do want to address really quick, and this is something that I've noticed in just watching a lot of the online tarot readers who go live, whether it's on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, any of it. And there's a lot of performative tarot reading going on right now. And just know you don't have to knock your deck with your hand. You don't have to shuffle your cards until cards fly out to make it say like the universe chose for you. You can still choose your cards. And it doesn't have to be that performative. So just keep that in mind if you are watching people online do this, as I feel like there's a lot more of the ego in the reader itself that kind of comes through versus wanting it to be a very genuine experience for someone. So just again, as always, have discernment as you consume media that is out there, and it goes especially the same for anything spiritual or psychic related. So, all right, back to our reading. So let's actually read it and see what we've got here. Okay, so for our reading, we are starting with that Devil card. Now, I don't necessarily pay attention to the cards behind it. Sometimes I do, but if I do, I kind of just see those as steps that you've already taken along the way to get where you are to be now. So that present energy, that big one, is what we're after. So the Devil tells us that we are in a position to stop those repeating patterns, to stop those repeating habits that are no longer good for us. And I often think about this too, especially in the US right now with all the stuff that we have going on. I believe it was Jasmine Crockett who said that we really need to start thinking of ways to take action that are outside of the box, because doing the normal things that we have done over and over are not working. And so even if we want to progress as a country, we need to start thinking of ways to do that outside of the box. And I think that very much embodies this energy of the Devil. So whether you're in the US or not listening to this doesn't matter. And also whether this is, you see this as personal or more as collective to the whole, it's whatever resonates for you. But the Devil is coming up because it is a chance for us to stop those patterns and habits that no longer serve us or no longer benefit us anymore. So off of that, let's go to our two opportunity cards. And we have the Seven of Swords and we have the Five of Swords. Now, I find this very interesting because I find both of these cards to have a little bit more of a challenging meaning to them. But because they are in our opportunity, I think that is a perfect space and time to work through these harder things, just like it is to work through all the things that the Devil is associated with. So the Seven of Swords, I kind of really see this as a lesson in cheating yourself. When the Seven of Swords comes up, oftentimes we might not be making the best decisions or taking the best actions. For us, sometimes we might blame others when things don't seem to go our way. And it's really just kind of a cheating to ourselves of putting that blame out there or maybe taking actions that are less honest for ourselves when it comes to dealing with others. So it's really kind of an opportunity to kind of look at this darker stuff within us, or the ways that we're speaking to people or taking actions for ourselves. And it's time to kind of say, you know what? I'm no longer going to participate in that. And it's time to move on. And I think that's going to lead us into our other opportunity, the Five of Swords, very nicely, because the Five of Swords is kind of all about participating in drama, I especially see with others in relation to our communication. And sometimes when people say hurtful things towards us, it's our natural inclination to want to say something just as spiteful back and even just as hurtful, to kind of even turn it up a notch and be like, well, you got me, I'm going to get you back. But really, this is coming up as an opportunity to say, you know what, I am done with this drama and I'm going to step outside of it. Even though it might be harder to be the bigger person, it's really time to put down those verbal swords that we're lashing out with and saying, you know what, this is not working and I need to do something different for myself. So both of these, again, kind of harder, challenging sword issues between the 5 and the 7 are really ways and opportunities to make some changes within ourselves and kind of get back on the track that feels better for us, and especially in the way that we're communicating with others and sharing our truths with them as well. So doing it in ways that honor everyone instead of kind of taking the easy, more dramatic path. And so moving on to our challenge, we have the Five of Wands, another 5, another challenge card. And so this one I still see as drama perpetuated even more. And it's almost, it gives me the image of people protesting in the streets, but you have two sides that are just yelling at each other, but no one is really listening to each other. One side just wants to be louder than the other. And I think even within our actions and how we go about our world, it's very easy to get caught up in the, again, not just the drama of what's being said, but by what people are doing, or to even take offense by what people are doing, and feeling so offended by that we then don't take action ourselves, but then just kind of become the victim instead of working through that. So the Five of Wands in our challenge tells us to, again, not actively participate in the drama and to not do things that are just going to fuel the fire right now, especially when everyone is just yelling at each other. We're not going to see eye to eye. So again, we need to find different ways to be able to go about this, to be able to deal with things or the personal levels in our lives, or whether that's on a big collective scale. So how do we do that? We have, again, another sword card. We have the King of Swords in our action space of what is the best action for us to do right now. And again, this was the very last card that I pulled that I laid down at the bottom. And so the King of Swords really tells us that it is time to be mature with our communications. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to be passive with our communications, but it means that we can do it with respect to others and ways of saying, you know what, I've been hurt by others and I don't necessarily need to lash out in that exact same way. Sometimes we don't have to say the thing that is on our mind. We can hold that back, especially if we know it is going to have adverse consequences, or if we know it's going to hurt people. So again, right now, the King of Swords is telling us that we need to act from our maturity and be able to find new solutions, be able to find new ways of how we talk to people and how we go about trying to communicate our own truths. And I think that also goes with the listening to others. And just because someone has a different viewpoint than us doesn't mean we're going to fly off the handle and go back into these lower 5 energies. It just means that we have, I want to say, the respect to be able to talk to others in a way that is not out of that kind of fiery lashing out. And and really just, I would also say with empathy, because I imagine that if someone else was to approach us, that we would want it to be done in that same respectful way. So I really kind of see this king, as far as our action goes, to really communicate in respectful ways. And that doesn't mean it's going to be received by others, but it does mean that we can still be the bigger person. So, all right, that is our official little reading that we have, and something that you can easily do for any question in your life if you have a tarot deck yourself. And once again, just super quick, we pulled for that first card until we got a major. Then we pulled the next 3 cards after that, and they became our opportunity, then the challenge, then our opportunity again. And then the very last card that we pulled, put on the bottom on its side, was our best course of action right now. So if you try this for yourself, I would love to hear how it goes and just how that kind of resonates for you. And I also really appreciate everyone who has regularly listened to this podcast so far. And I would like to offer my special reading discount that I only offer for the tours or to friends and family. And so if you would like to experience a reading with me, you can do so in 15-minute intervals. You can either do 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45, or an hour. And this is good for one-time use. And that will be $25 per 15 minutes. So 25, 50, 75, or 100 if you want to do the hour. And so all you have to do is send me an email at info@charlescrooks.com and say you listen to the podcast, you want to take advantage of the discount, and you want to book a reading. So it is that simple. We're not going to do discount codes or anything like that. All you have to do is say that you've listened to the podcast, and you can take advantage of that offer for one reading for yourself. So if you want to experience or book something, once again, that is info@charlescrooks.com. All right, my friends, that is officially all I have for you in this episode for today. I cannot thank you enough for being here and being open. You can visit charlescrooks.com or info@charlescrooks.com to book a reading. May you forever be chucked and blessed, and always go into this world with clear eyes and an open butt. Until next time, stay curious, my friends.